I want you to imagine the year is 2012, and either you or a child or someone you know is watching Nickelodeon. An episode of SpongeBob just wrapped up, it fades to black, and then you hear this. NFL Rushdown was an early 2010s TV show on Nickelodeon, Nicktoons, and the NFL Network. It would span 3 seasons and 65 episodes from September 6, 2010 to October 22, 2014. Today it is remembered as a TV show, but the idea behind it started all the way back in 2007 as a web game of the same name. It was a game similar to Club Penguin. It would allow kids to create an avatar, select which team to represent, and play a variety of minigames to collect virtual currency, aka it was 2K's My Career mode all the way back in 2007. The game also allowed you to take care of pets called Game Balls, which were this game's equivalent to the Puffins in Club Penguin. On June 28, 2010, the NFL announced their partnership with Nickelodeon to launch an animated series based on the web game. It would be called Rushdown Guardians of the Core. The premise for this show can be a bit crazy, so bear with me while I'll go through it real quick. Essentially, each NFL stadium is a stronghold for an otherworldly force known as the Shards. These shards were once the life force of the core of a far-off, peaceful planet which broke apart, and now a villain known as Sudden Death, who is voiced by the legendary Matthew Mercer, wants to find the shards to reassemble them and end humanity. The inhabitants of this planet were the Rushers, who were alien humanoids that created the 32 NFL teams in order to protect these shards, and thus their designs bear resemblance to the team's logos, city, or history. The show follows Ishmael Taylor, who goes by Ish for pretty much the entirety of the show. He's voiced by Joshua Jackson in season 1 and Malachi Cohen in the following 2 seasons. Ish is described as hip, funny, smart, insightful, caring, and brave, which is a lot of descriptions to give to a protagonist. His favorite team is also said to be the San Diego Chargers, so there's a bit of balancing out there. One thing I want to mention really quick, but we'll go into a bit more detail about it later on, is that this show feels very stuck in the 2000s and the 2010s. The first season was released alongside each week of the 2010 NFL season, and as we go over these episodes, I'll touch base on any plot points that I feel are necessary to understand the story of this show, as well as go over any players that are involved, any teams that are the focus of these episodes, and for season 1 specifically, we'll go over and rank the designs for these rushers. Season 1 is a bit weird, each episode is roughly 2 to 5 minutes long, so it's not really a lot to go over, so thus we'll just go over the rushers instead. I'm also going to briefly touch base on the tier list itself because there is one tier that is different. Everything else is standard S through D tier, but I'm making the final tier, the F tier, called something differently. As I've joked with some of my friends, I've done this name before the final tier, and that is Percy Jackson DS. This is a DS game that released in 2010 to tie in with a really bad movie, and thus the game itself was also pretty damn bad, so as to resemble a mistake of a design. The first episode aired on September 6, 2010. In it, Ish doesn't get picked for football during recess, which yes does come into play later on, surprisingly. He would then go home to play a football video game that totally isn't Madden 11 at the time. While playing, he meets OT, who would later go by RZ. He would say that he needs Ish, and more will be explained later on at the Chargers game. Ish's mom would likely win tickets for said game. While at the game, he follows a hot dog seller and runs into a Blitzbot, pretty much the lackeys or the henchmen in this universe. The Blitzbot is trying to steal the Chargers shard, but he would be defeated by Ish and the Chargers rusher, who goes by Bolt and was previously disguised as the hot dog seller.
Get your hot dogs.
The Chargers rusher goes by Bolt in this season and this season only. In both season 2 and 3, they completely forget that these rushers have names outside of just insert team rusher. Bolt is the only rusher to appear in the first 3 episodes, and he actually has a pretty fine design compared to some of the others we'll be talking about. I like how the helmet has a visor on the top of it, and the face mask being designed to be similar to a lightning bolt in the Chargers logo is all a great touch. Overall, the design itself, as the beach vibe to it, does fit San Diego and the Chargers during that era as well, and all around, this is a pretty good A design for a rusher. The second and third episodes see Ish return to Charger Stadium to learn more about the situation, and this is where we get the info dump about the premise of the show. Bolt takes him underneath the stadium to get more explanations about some of the other finer things going on, but this is where Ish would meet Norv Turner, who was the head coach of the Chargers at the time. Ish will get introduced to the game balls during this episode, as well as learn more about Sudden Death and what his plan is. Episode 4 has the game balls giving Ish a lock that would allow him to travel from his school locker to the locker room of any NFL stadium. He uses it to travel to New Orleans, where he tries and fails to protect the Saints shard. This episode introduces us to the rushers for the Saints and the Cowboys on top of it. And this is the first bit I mentioned. Although this show releases week in with the NFL season of 2010, the actual games that take place did not happen during the 2010 season. The Saints and Cowboys did not play each other in New Orleans this season. They played each other in Dallas very later on into the season. Now, to not get the specific week of these games is totally fine. These episodes are made well in advance, probably before the NFL schedule is even fully released. But to not get the locations right is a bit confusing because we know a bunch of these locations years in advance. So you would think they would at least make sure to get the location right for some of these games. The Saints rusher is called Alto, and it's a pretty basic design that's supposed to resemble a jazz musician, I believe at the very least. This goes with the fact that in this episode, Alto uses a saxophone to try and help protect the shard, as well as have a beaded gold chain around his neck. The design changed slightly from season 1 to season 2 and onward, but for the most part it is still just a pretty basic design that will get a C. As for Lasso, the Cowboys rusher, this design is near one-to-one with their actual mascot, Rowdy. Obviously there are some differences due to the cartoon art style, but for the most part, they're the exact same. This is a C. The next episode is centered around Ish going to a game with the Giants and Vikings to try and help protect the Giants shard. Another case of a game that did happen in real life, just not in the correct location, which this is even more confusing because they knew this matchup was going to happen 4 years in advance minimum because of it being a scheduled divisional head-to-head between the NFC East and the NFC North. The Giants rusher is called Liberty, and it's a pretty basic design, but I do still like it. It is essentially just a football player with the Liberty torch and the crown, and the face mask is said to resemble those viewing platforms as well to a degree. For the most part, it is still kind of basic, but those little touches are nice for it to resemble the Statue of Liberty, so it does just barely get a B. The Vikings rusher is called Thor, and this is pretty similar to the case with Lasso, where it looks the exact same pretty much as their actual mascot, just with a cartoony art style. Hi, me while editing this. I am also just now realizing while editing that the Vikings rusher messed up their helmet. They added an unnecessary white helmet stripe to it. So initially this was going to C, but because of that, this will fall into D. Episode 6 has Ish go into Denver during a Broncos-Titans game, and initially he is successful in protecting the shard, but a blitzbolt uses the last of his energy to throw a corruption football at the Broncos rusher, who would then take the shard for himself and go ahead and give it to sudden death. Upon getting home from this game, Ish would get grounded, which does play a factor in the next few episodes, surprisingly enough. The Broncos rusher that gets corrupted is called Steed, and much like Thor and Lasso, this is just a cartoony version of Miles, the Broncos' actual mascot, so it gets a C. The Titans rusher is called Cyclops, and I have my issues with this design, and I have my questions with this design. All of my issues are pretty nitpicky, mainly with the naming convention. Because if it's supposed to represent Titans, why call it Cyclops when Cyclopses and Titans are not the same thing in Greek mythology? And there's nothing about this design that really resembles a Cyclops in the first place. But again, that's nitpicky. My main question I have with this design is that how does relocation and drastic rebranding work in this universe? This is a question that does not get brought up at all in the show and kind of leaves me wondering how things work. Because when you go from the Tennessee Oilers to the Tennessee Titans, that is a pretty drastic rebrand. They're not going to be looking similar at all. You're not going to have someone with the name Oilers or representing the Oilers have a shield and a Spartan helmet. So how does it go from the Oilers to this design we see now? Did the Oilers rusher die and this one come in to replace him? Or did he just simply completely overhaul his wardrobe? It's a question that doesn't get answered, which makes sense, but it does leave me with the issue of this show being stuck in the 2000s. And while yes, they do talk about the history of these teams from before the year 2000, but in terms of actually resembling anything from before 2000, they kind of just straight up don't. And this was the perfect chance to do something, have something to harken back to the Oilers within this thing's design, because the whole point of these rushers is that they resemble a team's history to some way. And they just straight up don't do that with the Titans rusher. So because of my nitpicks, the questions this causes me, and all around me just not really liking the Titans branding all too much, This is going to be the first D tier of the video. Due to Ish being grounded, in the next episode, the Colt shard gets stolen during a game between them and Washington. With Ish not being there at the game, the rushers for them do not appear at this moment, so we'll touch on them on a later point. The following episode has Ish protecting the Lion shard from a fantasy football blitz bot disguised as Calvin Johnson, because sure, why the hell not? The episode ends with Ish leaving his locker open and his school bully entering, stealing the lock, and this is where him not getting picked for football comes back into play. Beast is the name for the Lions rusher, and this is where he makes his first appearance. It's not a bad design. I like the lion head and mane that they went with, and the fierceness of it all looks good. That is until you get to the rusher's face itself, and that's where it starts to lose me a bit. Mainly the eyes. I don't like how the fangs of the lion head covers the eyes a bit, and seeing it in motion, better motion in season 2 and 3 is definitely something else. It's still good enough though to get a B tier. Due to the lock getting stolen, Ish needs help to get from stadium to stadium, so he goes to some of the other rushers for help. At the same time of this, his sub or his robotic stand-in gets destroyed in Seattle and leads to their shard being stolen. 5 rushers appear in this episode. It is all of the bird teams. The Seahawks rusher is called Freefall, and to me it kind of misses the mark. I do like that the helmet is just a Seahawks helmet with the beak actually protruding and sticking out. I feel like that was a nice touch, but that's kind of where my positive thoughts on this end. The rest is just a standard looking dude with some wings on his arms, and it kind of messes up with what I kind of wanted from a Seahawks rusher. Some of the other bird teams do it better, and we'll get into those in a second here, but I kind of wish they leaned into it being a bird more so. I do get that a Seahawk is not a real animal, instead of just a more cartoony osprey, but it still would have been cool for them to kind of lean into stuff a bit more with this. In the end, the helmet does save it from being all too low on this tier list, so I'm going to give it a C. Talon is the Falcons rusher, and this also misses the mark on it, but in somehow a worse way compared to Freefall. Unlike a Seahawk, a Falcon is a real bird, so just to make Talon a dude with wings and a Falcon's helmet doesn't really do anything for me. And the helmet design is also worse than Freefall because it feels crowded in a way, having the Falcon's face on top of having the Falcon's logo there. So it just feels crowded. They kind of missed the mark on the design itself and not leaning into the bird aspect like the other 3 teams do. So it's going to fall into D tier. Swoop is the most basic way to tackle the Eagles rusher, because 1, it's an eagle through and through. But unlike Freefall, they didn't do anything special with the helmet. Even though the Eagles helmet is one of the more unique helmets in the league, I would have liked to see something done there. Also, they went really lazy calling it Swoop, because that's just the same exact name as the Eagles' actual mascot. This is one of 3 times this happens, and it feels even more lifeless because of it, but because they didn't make the same mistake with the Seahawks and Falcons by making it a dude in a helmet, I'm still going to give this a C. Scavenger is the Ravens rusher, and it's not a bad take on a cartoony Poe by any means. It's just a raven, and while it does at times look a bit funny in season 2, it's still not bad.
I don't want to panic anyone, but our coach is missing!
That is until you see that they got the helmet wrong. The Ravens are one of a few teams that do not have a helmet trick that goes from the front to all the way in the back of the helmet. It cuts off roughly midway through. But for some reason, not only are the helmet striping wrong on this design, but the striping spacing as well is wrong and is too far wide for me to let it pass. This is such an easy thing to get right. They get it right with some of the other rusher designs in this, but somehow they mess it up here and it falls all the way down to D tier because of it. The final one is Peck, the rusher for the Arizona Cardinals. This is basic in the same way that Lasso, Thor, and Steed were basic as well. It got the must-haves right, so like those others, it's going to go right into C tier. Over the next 2 episodes, they focus on the Rams, with episode 10 seeing the bullies forced their way to St. Louis after being confronted by Ish, and unleashing a blitz bot the size of the stadium. Ish arrives in episode 11, but arrives too late to make a difference, and the Rams shard gets stolen. This is also when Rampage, the Rams rusher, makes an appearance. Like Swoop, this is the same name as the Rams' actual mascot, but the design does lean heavier into the Ram aspect of it. It has hooves, the horns of the helmet are sticking out into the design itself, and it looks nice in doing so, but they still also messed up the helmet. In the same way with the Ravens rusher, they mess up the helmet striping. This time though, it's them giving the Rams helmet a stripe in the first place when it doesn't actually have one. The Rams helmet is one of the best helmets in the NFL, and to add in an unnecessary helmet stripe to it just does not make a lot of sense, especially because they already have the horns being implemented fantastically in this design. It's just a confusing mistake to make, and it brings it down to B tier. Otherwise, this is a near perfect rusher. Ish goes to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in order to train and be able to harness the power of the rush zone. In order to do this, he uses previous Super Bowls in order to simulate battling different blitz spots across different Super Bowls. During this, Ish is supervised by the rushers for the Packers and Chiefs, and also finds the Guardians playbook, which makes him extremely skilled at football. No, that is not a joke. Pack is the Packers rusher and resembles that of an older football player, including the leather helmet and all. There isn't a lot that you can do in terms of a Packers rusher in the first place, but they actually did a pretty good job with this. It gets an A tier. Time for the Chiefs rusher, known as Arrowhead, like the stadium. And this design was indeed allowed to air on Nickelodeon. They saw nothing wrong with this. Am I going to be overreacting a little bit to this? Yes, because at the core of this design, if you just take off the helmet, the spear, and the eye black, those three can be the core for a really good design for a Chiefs rusher. But when you smack on that yellow skin to this, I don't know how they approved of this, and I do get that yellow is the Chiefs' secondary color, but they don't use it themselves a lot in their branding, and to throw it on there in such a prominent way in this design is absolutely baffling to me, and all around makes it just a really rough design to look back on. So we're just going to stick it into the bottom tier, into Percy Jackson DS, and we're going to move on. The next two episodes have Ish in Foxborough to get a new sub, and also to protect the Shard against Colossus blitz spots during the game with the Texans. After protecting the Shard, Ish runs into a new kid at school called Ash. Full name Ashley Reynolds. Ash is voiced by Marissa Kress in season 1 and Nika Fruderman in the other seasons. She is the brains of the group and is a fan of the Patriots. The Patriots rusher is called Freedom, and you know what? No notes. This is a perfect rusher design for the Patriots. From the tricorn hat on top of the helmet to the all-around Boy Scout feel that this rusher has, and the use of the American flag as a weapon in this episode and in season 3, as well as just carrying it around in general in other episodes, this is a perfect design. Yes, it's just a cartoony Pat the Patriot. They still imbued the spirit of the Patriots in this in a much better way compared to the Vikings, Cowboys, Broncos, and Cardinals. So Freedom here gets the first S tier of the video. On the flip side, the Texans rusher, which is called Toro, aka the exact name as their actual mascot, is just goofy on another level. Everything about this is just funny decisions being made left and right. From the length of the horns in this design and other renderings and drawings of it, to the 3 colors across the entire body, yes, they do go all the way down, to the not quite bull-like face that it has, to whatever this frame of it is in season 1. This is just an all-around funny design that it feels like they wanted to lean into the full bull aspect of the Texans logo, but for one reason or another just did not fully commit to it and left it like this. If it was more bull inspired and more of like a proper and competent design, it would be higher, but from this all around, Toro was going to get a D tier. Episode 16 centers around the Steelers and Bengals, with their rushers making an appearance. Blowtorch is the Steelers rusher, and this is also a fantastic rusher for the team. It being just a standard player, but with the Weldon mask added, is a very nice touch. There isn't a lot else going on with this though, unlike the Patriots one having the flag added as well, so this does just go into A tier. Fang is the Bengals rusher, and yep, that is certainly a tiger alright. They did what they needed to do with it, and it looks good in doing so, but holy hell, what is that front-facing shot of this thing? It is nightmare fuel, and because of it, it drops Fang to just get the Bengals logo, aka a B. In the next episode, a heavy-duty blitzbot attacks a Dolphins 49ers game. Like Miami needed any more issues during this time. During the battle, Ash is revealed to be working for Sudden Death and helps capture Ish. Sonar is the Dolphins rusher, and this design is something. To begin with, this is the only rusher to seemingly have a football-shaped head, with the pointed chin being a giveaway towards that. The wristbands and fins are also a pretty solid touch on this. But the main thing is the helmet. I get why the helmet is colored, so that way it resembles a Dolphin's head a bit better. But this is the first time ever in an official NFL product that the Dolphins had a different colored based helmet than just the standard white. It took up until this past NFL season for Miami to finally on the field wear a different colored base helmet, but this is the first time it actually appeared in something, and for it to be an NFL rush zone is both funny and kind of annoying. The helmet also doesn't need the eyes on it, but I do like having the fin there, so you can keep that, but just the eyes aren't really needed. The nitpicks included and aside, this does still go into B tier. Pickaxe is the rusher for the 49ers, and this is also a perfect rusher design. It just being a straight up miner with a pickaxe and the headlamp being a part of the helmet is brilliant, and the long beard as well really just adds to all of that. This is better than the 49ers actual mascot and kind of fits the team better as a whole. This goes right up there with Freedom and the Patriots in S tier. Ish gets rescued by the Bears, Panthers, Buccaneers, and Browns rushers. And while trying to flee from sudden death's ship, they get cornered and need to make a split-second decision as there is a football bomb ticking away. The Bears rusher is called Grizzly, and similar to the Bengals where, yep, that is just a bear with a bear's helmet on. Much like Fang, its forward-facing design does look terrible in majority of the time, and it will be slotted in right there with Fang as well at B tier. Claw is the Panthers rusher, and this combines things from other rushers that didn't really thrill me. While yes, that is a panther, it also looks like if you remove the helmet, it would fit perfectly in with Cats the musical. Also, the helmet is crowded as well, much like the Falcons rusher's one. With the ears and panther face on top of the logo itself, it all is just kind of crowded. If it was just the ears, I could see it working pretty well, but with the face and even the eyebrows on it, it's gonna get a low B. Pegleg is the Buccaneers rusher, and he is the one that placed the football bomb. And this is a great design. I can see the blend with the current Buccaneers design and branding in combination with their creamsicles look. I can see how this transitioned from the 70s and 80s into their 2000s and current look really well. And because of that, it gets an S tier. This is kind of what I was hoping for from the Titans rusher. The final one of the bunch is K9, the Browns rusher, and from a surface level look, this isn't bad. But at the same time, the lore in this universe is that these rushers are what helped inspired and create these NFL teams and their respective branding. Which means that Arthur B. McBride looked at this rusher and said point blank, the team will be called the Browns. The name is supposed to be in reference to the dog pound and the fan base, and that would have worked well if the design also lead into that just a bit, but this is just a dude, Percy Jackson DS tier. The next episode shows them successfully reaching an escape pod and arriving in San Diego, where they see on a Jumbotron that the head of Sudden Death's ship somehow is still intact and is coming to Earth. The next two episodes and the season finale movie are centered around the Super Bowl, which in the show's universe is the Jets and Cowboys, and Jerry Jones even makes an appearance. The Super Bowl in real life was the Steelers and Packers, with the Jets losing the AFC Championship game and the Cowboys not even making the playoffs. And this would be a running theme in the Super Bowl specials. In these episodes, it's basically just one giant battle spread out across them, and the movie even does show some of the other prior episodes before this. At some point, Sudden Death believes to have all the shards and tries to reassemble the core, but one of them was fake. Ish uses a battle axe to destroy Sudden Death after he realizes one of the fake shards. Ish and Ash then themselves reassemble the core and declare victory over Sudden Death. And that's how season 1 wraps up. Before we get to season 2, let's quickly go over all the rushers that did not get a big focal point in season 1. Starting with Soar, the Jets rusher, and this is a perfect design considering how bad the Jets branding is for certain things. Then making it a fighter pilot with a jetpack is perfect, S tier. Spike, who was called Pillage in season 1, is the Raiders rusher, and this is basically just a Raiders superfan, so I like the design. It fits with what has become known as the Raiders over the past few years. Is it creative? Not really, but it does still fit with what people think when it comes to the Raiders, so it gets a C. Spot is the Jaguars rusher, and it's a good design that honestly does the same thing the Panthers was going for, but in a better way. You can clearly tell it's a Jaguar and it doesn't need the extra stuff on the helmet for you to be able to tell that. It also, funnily enough, has a helmet the Jaguars didn't debut until 2018 with the all-black helmet with the new logo. For fixing the gradient mistake and just being the Panthers rusher but slightly better, it gets a B tier as well, but on the higher side of B tier. Stampede, the Bills rusher, has a design I can get behind with the fur patches and the horns. While most of the other things of design doesn't scream buffalo, it is still a design that comfortably sits into B tier. Stallion is the Colts rusher, and I feel like for this design they could have gone with something similar to the Broncos. Instead, they went with something more aligned with the Falcons. The horse head on the helmet looks fierce enough, and I like that the mane is what makes the helmet stripe on this one, but I do just wish they went full horse in the same way they did for the Broncos instead of going the way they did for the Falcons. I feel like it probably would not be looking the greatest, but it would be at least something that sticks out a lot more, so this goes comfortably into C tier. The final rusher to cover is Chief, the rusher for the Washington Commanders, and this is a confusing one. Yes, there isn't a lot they could have done to make it not look absolutely terrible, but what does this design have to do with Washington? I mean, it kind of looks like George Preston Marshall, but that's me kind of stretching at ideas here. It's one of those things where there really wasn't a good choice for them to make, so they just simply went with the least offensive option. It's still going to put them into D tier. There would be no rush zone for the 2011 season, but at the start of the 2012 season, it was announced that season 2 was on the way, and it was going to be going through an overhauled production. The show is now going to consist of proper 22-minute episodes and is going to be produced by Rollman Entertainment, the same people behind
Word of advice, don't drop the soap.
Why?
and also made
What disappears the moment you say its name? My father!
I'm going to treat season 2 the same way with season 1, as the extra lore that gets added through the longer episode length is more so just filler and doesn't really add anything to the show. The main rush zone action is the focus. Season 2 does see a new threat called Wildcard, voiced by Troy Baker, who's after a new MacGuffin called the Megacores. These Megacores were created to harness the power of the shards after they grew too big after the results of Season 1. These help boost the team's play during game day, but they must be out in the open in order for them to work on game day. The season begins with a Thanksgiving special focused on the Lions and the special guest of the episode being Calvin Johnson. One thing this season and season 3 does is spend a good chunk of the episode talking about the teams and special guests through the use of highlight packages and voiceovers. Ish and Ash works together to protect the Lions Megacore, but everyone forgets the Texans. This episode also introduces us to 3 new characters who become more of prominence later, but let's go over them now real quick. Troy Kang is voiced by Johnny Young Bosch and is a fun-loving, arrogant hothead that is a fan of the Saints. Tua Tuipulola, who is voiced by Ogie Banks in this season and Marcus Griffith in the 3rd season, is the muscle and heart of the group and is a fan of the Bears. Martin Stevens, who goes by Marty, is voiced by Andy Aragon and is the prankster and tech-savvy member who's also a fan of the Cleveland Browns. The second episode showcases what happens when the Megacore gets stolen, with the Texans falling ill. The focus then shifts to Dallas for their Thanksgiving Day game, where the duo helps protect the Megacore from Dropkick, who is kind of like the right-hand man for Wildcard, and is voiced by Jesse Cordy. In the process, they successfully regain the Texans Megacore after they defeated a Blitzbot that was being charged by the Megacore. The third episode is centered around the Patriots, with Rob Gronkowski and Steven Gostkowski making an appearance. Ash also gets more of a focus in this episode for character development. They successfully protect the Patriots Megacore, and in the next episode, they are off to New Orleans, with Troy officially becoming a Guardian. This is the point where I would mention that the human designs are not the greatest in this show, and they do some of these players really dirty. For example, Drew Brees. That is not Drew Brees. No one can tell me otherwise, because that is not Drew Brees. Greg Jennings is the guest for the next episode as the Packers get a focus, but this is where more confusion comes in. From what was said in episode 1, these Megacores not only need to be more in the open, but also still need to be pretty close to the team in order to work on game day. Also, as established in season 1, these players on these respective teams were put there to also help protect the Megacore and the shards themselves. So explain to me why the Packers Megacore is in an ice sculpture outside of the stadium for game day. The Packers rusher, Pack, says,
Close enough to the players and fans to help build the game energy, but safely hidden inside 50 tons of ice.
but you still need to protect it with the players that you signed specifically to protect it. Also, the main battle for this episode is supposed to happen during the game, and yet when they cut to the stadium for parts of this battle, you do not see anyone in that stadium aside from Greg Jennings and not Aaron Rodgers. They do successfully protect the Packers Megacore though, and they also get the Saints one back in return. This is also where I would like to mention that the rushers don't do anything in this season. They're just there to look crazy and be out of place during some moments and have these big heads that they have. In season 1 and 3, it's established that they have some sort of powers, yet they don't use them in this season at all, and it is showcased also in this next episode when the Jets are the focus. The Jets are the main team for this episode. Rex Ryan makes a guest appearance, but at the same time, the Lions and Broncos rushers are more prominent rushers in this episode, with all Sword the Jets rusher doing is driving the team bus and then flying Ish and Tua to the game with the Megacore after they protected it. Due to Tua's heroics in this episode, he becomes a Guardian by the end of it. This is also where he gets his big spotlight episode as the main character. This video is already getting a bit long, so let's speedrun the next few episodes here as nothing really happens. Episode 7 is the Bears and Vikings, both Megacores getting captured but swiftly recovered in the same episode. Episode 8 is the Steelers and Browns, of which both rushers get kidnapped early on into the episode. The Megacores as well get stolen. A new Guardian, Marty, arrives to help get the Steelers Megacore, and Tua helps the rushers escape. The Browns Megacore is still in the hands of Wildcard. Episode 9 highlights the Ravens and 49ers. Both hardballs make a guest appearance in this one. Ish gets brainwashed to help steal the 49ers Megacore alongside John Harbaugh getting brainwashed. Marty removes the chips from John and Ish, and they work together to regain the Megacores. So that brings us to the Super Bowl, which in this universe is the Broncos and Giants. In real life, it was the stars of the previous episode, the Ravens and 49ers. The Broncos lost in the divisional round to the Ravens, and the Giants missed the playoffs entirely. We get in this episode as well, the amount of actual plot shortens even more as they touch into the offseason quite a bit. At the start of the offseason, an info dump occurs to explain the creation of Wildcard.
I knew the project would be successful, and my son was going to be the first Guardian. A decision that I will always regret.
We did succeed in uniting the shards of the core temporarily, but the power was too great to be contained.
Now, sidekick, now!
Too much power. It's hurting him. Abort! Abort!
Also at a point during the offseason, Wildcard created clones of the Guardians, which hurt their reputation and made it easier for him to start getting Megacores. Ricardo Cervantes, who goes by Ricky, also gets introduced, and he's voiced by Nicholas Roy. He was the rival to Ish, but eventually works alongside him, with his favorite team being the Arizona Cardinals. So now Wildcard, with all of the cores, manages to absorb all their power with the same tech that was used to clone the Guardians. In a last-ditch effort to protect humanity, Ish sacrifices his powers in order to save the core, the NFL, and the world as we know it. And that wraps up Season 2. Season 3 got announced shortly after Season 2 premiered back on July 11th. It got announced through a promo that showcased that, hey, Sudden Death is back and will return. Season 3 also changes up the animation quite a bit, with pretty much all the alien characters now being 3D animated, and this includes the rushers themselves. The first episode introduces Sudden Death's new henchmen called the Anti-Corians, and no, I'm not making that up. These are also alien humanoids who have sworn a rivalry with the rushers, and they just look like generic robots. They also give no explanation why they have a rivalry with the rushers. Their names are Ankoro, Stellaria, and Zich. The first 2 episodes from the Guardian standpoint are centered around Ish struggling to deal with the loss of his powers. In the first episode, he gets captured by Sudden Death, who then tries to turn him by offering his powers back, but first he would need to steal the Megacores of the Browns and Chargers. Ish would obviously reject the offer in episode 2, but he gets mind controlled anyway, and now goes out and tries to steal the Lions Megacore. This is where we get the third appearance of Calvin Johnson in this show, and through the help of Megatron, Ish breaks through the brainwashing and regains his Guardian powers very briefly in order to retrieve the stolen Megacores. The third episode is centered around the Steelers and Bengals, with Mike Tomlin and Marvin Lewis making appearances to encourage Ish, who is still struggling with his new powers. Meanwhile, Ash and Tua are captured by the Anti-Corians. Ricky gets captured at Heinz Field along with Blowtorch and Fang. And here is your reminder that the rushers do have names, as again, the show themselves never calls them by it again after Season 1. The bulk of this episode also takes place inside a video game, with all the Guardians but Ish being inside the game. After losing at the game, Sudden Death does his best COD player impression and tries to attack Ish with an energy beam, but instead it powers him up to be able to transform into his new Guardian form and escape with his Steelers Megacore, but the Bengals one is still taken. Episode 4 is the Packers and Dolphins, and the episode starts with action early on, with the Dolphins team bus being attacked and is protected by Ryan Tannehill. Later on, there's a larger attack at Lambeau Field, and the rushers nearly get captured, but
If it weren't for Tua's bravery, we'd be on our way to Sudden Death's dungeon. Or worse.
Over the sideline and picks. Russell Douglas. Third consecutive drive that ends in an interception. And how about the Packers D standing tall today?
however, still both Megacores get stolen, and they act like everything's fine. They highlighted back in Season 2 that when the Megacores get stolen, the team becomes ill and therefore can't perform. so it's important to get the Megacores back. Yet when both get stolen in this episode, they make really no fuss about it. Same went with the Bengals one. They didn't even mention it amongst the Guardians themselves afterwards. They just all celebrated getting the Steelers one back. Now for the Dolphins, this doesn't really mean anything. They're already not a great team at this time. But for the Packers and Bengals, those were playoff teams in 2012. It actually means something for them and would drastically hurt them. Speedrun in the next few episodes, we get the Chiefs and Giants.
Okay, guys, let's go play some football.
With appearances from Jamal Charles and Justin Tuck. This also acts as the Christmas special for the season. Bears and Seahawks get a focus next, with the Bears practice facility being shown. Julius Peppers, Matt Forte, and Russell Wilson show up in order to teach the Guardians how to deal with the cold.
Broncos country, let's ride.
Broncos and Ravens are next, and the episode starts with the Megacore getting stolen and the captures of Ash and Eric Decker. The day gets saved by the other Guardians and Ray Rice, who's trying to save his image. Rivalry Week gets showcased again, this time with Washington and Dallas. There's appearances by RG3 and DeMarcus Ware in this episode. The Pro Bowl special doesn't feature any team specifically, but it does see appearances by Chris Collinsworth and Michael Irvin in big roles as they help save the Megacores of the Super Bowl teams. The Super Bowl for this season has the 49ers and Texans making the big game, and much like previous seasons, one of these teams were eliminated before the Super Bowl and the other missed the playoffs entirely. In this case, the 49ers lost in the NFC Championship game, and the Texans won a solid 2-14 this season. Vernon Davis and JJ Watt helped the Guardians stop the Earth from being hurled into deep space. This leads into the midseason special going alongside the NFL draft, and it is space adventure time for the Guardians. They are looking for the missing pieces of the anti-core. Essentially, the anti-core is a counter to the core that the Guardians have been trying to protect. RG3, Chris Collinsworth, Michael Irvin, and Nick Mangold get summoned to help defend the Earth against sudden death while the Guardians are off-world. To speedrun the rest of the season as well, Sudden Death reveals that he brought back Dropkick from Season 2 while Danny Amendola and Matt Ryan appear. The following episode sees Dropkick freeing Wildcard from prison while the Raiders and Howie Long get the focus. Greg Olsen and Andrew Luck are next as the Panthers and Colts get a focus for their meeting. Kendall Wright of the Titans helps the Guardians out while Bills running back CJ Spiller gets captured by Sudden Death, who would go on to make a clone of him to help steal the Titans' Megacore alongside a fake Bills rusher after the Bills had their Megacore stolen to begin the episode. Eagles and Cardinals get a focus next with appearances from Brett Selleck and Larry Fitzgerald. The episode also sees Wildcard framing the anti-Corrigan for a double crossing of Sudden Death. Saints and Rams get the focus next with Sudden Death planning on stealing the Saints' Super Bowl rings in order to power his latest plan. With the help of Marquez Colson and James Laurinaitis, the Guardians briefly are able to recover them as Wildcard and Dropkick also trick Sudden Death. However, Sudden Death still gets the rings and his lair gets destroyed in the process. The season finale looks into the NFL's international push, with the Guardians going to London. The Jaguars and Buccaneers get the focus in this one. The real international series this season didn't feature the Buccaneers at all, and the Jaguars instead were playing the Cowboys. Mercedes Lewis and Jalen McCoy are the two players to get featured in this episode. Sudden Death unleashes his super weapon, so the Guardians turn to Wildcard to help. Wildcard would betray them by taking the Guardian powers away and leaving after Sudden Death is defeated for good, it seems. The Guardians quickly rush back to Canton to deal with Dropkick, who is trying to blow up their headquarters, which by the way is underneath the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Probably should have mentioned that sooner, but it doesn't really matter all too much in the grand scheme of things until this point. But with the power of the Jaguars and Buccaneers Megacores, plus some of the Super Bowl rings, they don't specify whose Super Bowl rings, they defeat Dropkick and the season ends with them needing to regroup before Wildcard attacks next. And that's where the show ends. NFL Rushdown would not get renewed for a season 4, and the NFL would depart from the animated sphere for the time being. They would still work with Nickelodeon though in the future for shows like Crash Leads and NFL Slime Time, plus all the different simulcast games that they have done in the past.
Oh, there's Russ Wilson. That's called an interception. That's not what he wanted to cook.
Would I say NFL Rushdown was a good show? Kinda, in a way. They improved the quality season over season, and by the end it was actually tolerable to watch at times with a blend of 3D and 2D animation, actually looking good more often than not. In a weird way, this show is kind of like the average NFL career, a rocky rookie season followed by 2 competent years before just kind of falling out of the league. It even lasted about as long as the average NFL career with just about 3 seasons. The entire show is archived on YouTube. The entire second season is still on the NFL Rush YouTube channel. So if you are bored one day and want to kind of just experience early 2010s Nickelodeon, go for it. It's all right there for you. I even put a link to a playlist in the description. They would also release a board game to tie into the show, and it's essentially just a really elaborate version of paper football with a touch of risk involved, with the movement being based off of getting a higher numbered dice roll compared to your opponent. And it seems like an actually well-made game, and also much like Season 2, the rushers do absolutely nothing in this board game. Do I think NFL Rushstone will ever come back? Hell no. I would be surprised if the NFL even acknowledges this show in the next decade. It is a massive product of its time and an example of an era of children's TV that I actually do kind of hope makes a comeback. More shows need to be campy like this and have a bit of charm to it in a weird way, instead of just the fast-paced nature that a lot of shows are going for these days. This is a kind of good fit and nice change of pace for it. It's a way to get kids engaged in the NFL early with standard length episodes, plus it does have a pretty catchy theme song as well. I appreciate everyone for tuning in for this. It's a bit different compared to the typical off-season video I make, but as I was working on the off-season recap stuff, I was initially going to use the rushers for the thumbnails, but I decided against it to stick with just the plain old mascots. But this got me and my friends talking about the show again, and I figured I would share it with everyone else as well. This is a fever dream from my childhood growing up in the early 2010s and being a big football and Nickelodeon fan. So thank you for everyone for sticking with me rambling about this weird show and going through all the seasons again. Again, this is different from what I usually make. Typically, I just go with a more streamlined football history discussion with like players or events or stuff, but I really wanted to talk about this old show. So again, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're a noob, we greatly appreciate it. Again, it isn't the typical stuff, but I wouldn't also mind talking more about random NFL stuff like this in the future. So subscribe, we greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have yourselves a damn good one. Peace.